fractional expressions. I've taught this whole lesson before. It's going to go pretty quick. It's multiplying and dividing fraction or rational functions, polynomial on top, polynomial on bottom. To start, we have to remind ourselves how to multiply and divide numbers. I'm going to put my calculator away and pretend I don't have it. Okay? Because with variables involved, you won't have a calculator, right? So we need to know what magic the calculator is doing. Well, first, what do I have to do? I have to flip the second fraction.
And then you're going to change the division to multiplication.
Good. Dividing by fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its recipient. So we have to flip the second fraction. You'd have to do the order of operations to figure out what's going on there. If they just have a string of them written, then you do the first two first and then go from there. But normally, if they do something like that, they have some parentheses somewhere, and you do two of them first and then go. Okay, from here. So listen. How many of you want to multiply 9 times 15 without a calculator? No. I don't need it, right? Don't want to do it. I'm not saying I can't. I'm saying I'd rather do it if I can avoid it. So I'm going to try to do some simplification before I start. I know you may or may not do this with numbers, but you will have to do this with variables. So we're going to go ahead and practice. So is there anything I can simplify? Good, the 6 and 9 would reduce to negative 2/3. Also, now I can't simplify it anymore. I could have even simplified the 15 and the 6. It would have done the same thing, so it doesn't make any difference. And then I'm going to multiply across the top and across the bottom, and I get negative 8 over 45, which is much more manageable without a calculator. Any questions? So what we're going to be working with are expressions that have variables in them. Before we start actually multiplying and dividing, the first thing this question asks is to simplify the fraction by itself and to state any restrictions. So the first thing I'm going to do if I want to simplify is factor. So a squared plus 5a plus 4 over a squared plus 9a plus 20. First thing I'm going to do is factor. How does the top factor?
Plus 1 plus.
And what about the 20? Factor 20 out of 89?
Plus 5. Plus.
Before I go on, I'm going to do the restrictions part. What do you think they're talking about when they say restrictions? Holes and asymptotes, right? Problems, things I can't do. You know, what is a restriction? It's something you can't do. Well, I can't plug in. What can't I plug in? Negative 4. Why can't I plug in negative 4? What will equal 0? The things. What things? What's the important part, though, for restrictions? What things you got? Denominator. The denominator is the problem, right? That's the place that I get errors in my calculator, right? Numerator is not a problem. Denominator is a problem. So a can't be negative 4, and what else can it not be?
Positive 4. Negative 5.
Negative 5. Why can't it be negative 5? Okay, both of those make the denominator 0. That's what's called a restriction. What makes the denominator 0? And the reason it's a restriction is I cannot plug it in. Well, it's not a problem because it's in the numerator. The restrictions are only the things that come from the denominator. Okay, now it says to simplify. I'm going to label my restrictions before I simplify because even though when I'm done I won't know that this was here. I do know that it was still a restriction that A couldn't be -4, so I'm going to write it down before I cancel. So restrictions are very similar to asking what can't be in the domain. Well, or holes. It's more of a domain question than specific as opposed to specific holes. What can't be in the domain? That's not planned. Okay. Any questions about that? I hear a noise.
I hear it every day, multiple times. Don't know what it is.
Might be the projector.
Pretty sure it's a bird.
I hear it.
There's a fan and the projector that cools it.
No, not that noise. I hear it.
There's also construction going on.
No.
What it is, it's the air vent thing on the roof.
Any questions so far? Remember, greatest common factor first. If there's a greatest common factor, factor it out. So what can A not be? Why not 0? Because the A by itself, 3 times 0 is 0. So it can't be -5, can't be 0. Does anything reduce? The 5. Good. The A plus 5 cancel?
Yes.
You should look good. Oh, you can. Wait, no. Okay. 2/3? Yeah.
It was that easy.
I didn't know if you could cancel it because there was 2 and it's 3 next to it.
The A still can cancel because it's all multiplication. So you can divide out.
Oh, that was easy. I thought it would be like 0, 8. Because we just ignored the 2 extra.
No. That would be if it were exponents.
So what is it?
Think about it. It's A could be a number, right? Say A is 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this would be 10 over 15. Which is the signs would cancel out. Okay, multiplying and divide.
What is it?
Good. The first thing I'm going to do is factor all of the pieces and simplify anything that simplifies. Does anything factor on the first part?
B plus. Now hang on.
7 on the top left. 7 factors out. Now, if you're really on top of things, you might choose to factor out a. One, no. A 7, yes. I like 7. A -7. Why would you factor out a -7? To put the B in front, like the other one? Okay, any questions so far?
Yeah.
Right, now I can just switch it. I didn't want to do too many steps at once, but now I can just switch it around. That's exactly why I factored out a -7.
Now what do you get?
-7's on the top,
What is
1 on the bottom. And now I multiply across the top and across the bottom. I'm left with -7 over B plus 2. Any questions about that?
The clock is broken.
Oh,
okay.
Do what? I can't hear your question, please.
The first column you start with the
It's multiplied. If it were divide, I'd have to flip the second one. And Adrian, did you have questions? In division, if everything cancels, you get a 1. Example, what's 3 divided by 3?
0.
1, because 3 cancel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the next one. Let me make it a little bigger for you. What else?
much better.
Okay, x squared minus 16. Does that factor?
X plus
X minus 4.
4.
Hey, what about x squared plus x minus 90? Factors of 90 that subtract to give you 1.
10 and 9.
Good. 10 and 9.
Plus 10 plus
40 that add to give you 14.
10 plus.
Now, the bottom, we could leave it like it is. But, since I glanced up here and see this x minus 9, what might we factor out of that bottom? A negative 1. Which makes it that, which is now the same as x minus 9.
What do we have left?
Not and get it to cancel.
Oh.
You'll have to fix it to make it cancel. So anyways. Oh no. Cancel anything that's on the top. If I can find a pair on the bottom, I can cancel it out.
X plus 4,
X plus 4 and x plus 4.
X plus 9,
X minus 9, x minus 9. And so the only thing that's left on top,
X minus 4 over negative 1.
which is negative x plus 4.
If we would have left it like that,
I would have given it to you. But it's
Well, you didn't do a multiply.
I did. I just canceled everything out before I. So it was kind of like that 9 and 6 that I had earlier. I canceled it out to make multiplication much easier. Aren't you glad we didn't have to FOIL all 4 of those terms out and then decide how they factored and canceled? We got to kind of do it. So yeah, let's look at the next one. What's different about the next one?
it's a division problem.
It's a division problem.
Multiplication, just like you showed us in the over here.
You're so smart.
Yeah.
So before I ever start, and just so we don't mess up, I'm not even going to do any factoring. Some of you can factor and flip at the same time, and that's fine. But just so we don't make any mistakes, I'm just going to go ahead. All I'm going to do on the first step is flip the first fraction. Always do that first. Don't factor first. Do that first, or you might make mistakes in there. Now you can do that and factoring at the same time if you can handle that. So anything factor. 2b factors out of the top left. Probably it does.
It's really, I hear it like 80 times a day.
I did that. 2b.
Or not.
2b divided by 1. Right, 1 on the bottom. Any questions? What? Okay, let's look at the next one. How are we doing? Good. The first time I did this, do y'all remember how stressed you were? You see why we did it twice? Why I get paid the big bucks.
Impressive.
Okay, the first thing I did, all I did was flip it. Do some factoring. Does it make any factor? Okay, not only a 3, actually a 9 too. The whole 9 times p minus 4. What about on the top? 5p squared. You get p minus 7. So, what cancels? So I'm left with p minus 7 over 9 times p minus 4. I will accept the answer either in this format or with the 9 distributed through. Either way, if I were you, I'd leave it out just because it's stuff I don't have to do. But either way. know how they're. I don't know. Isn't that Chinese? That they read? Yeah. I think Chinese people do math the same way we do. I've had classes with Chinese people. I think math is kind of one of the universal languages that they never read.
So you believe in like a one world currency?
No.
Candy.
I believe
Big world peace.
Math solves everything.
now wait a minute.
Exactly. For that.
Okay, so how did you go from 5p cubed math through? Okay. Oh wait, no.
Well, they told me I was going to that. But yes, you can go ahead and start it. Why don't we do the last two? I'll make the bigger so you get. Yeah. Select why.
Good. Very good.
Well, I thought we were still waiting for someone.
We are. I'm waiting. I'll try this. These. Open. Spanish and English. A whole language. Why did that? I think the Spanish, the Latin, Levi, even Christian or not Christian, Latin, Spanish, English happened later than that would have been.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been a long time ago. Like,
We make the book. I can
now you might want another line. Okay, it sounds like that. Okay, let's start on the. Hey. I'm talking now. All of your very philosophical discussions are on that line. Factor out a 10x on the top. Is that what everyone did? And what do we factor out on the bottom? The right, top right. Now, how many of you at first factored out a 4 or an 8? How many of you did that first? If you did, you'll notice the numbers left still have a greatest common factor, so just do it again if that happens. 5, right? Okay, so then we're left with, if we leave this as is, we've got 10 times x times 16 on the top over 40 times 6 on the bottom. Are we sure that we want to multiply 10 times 16 and 40 times 6 before we reduce some more? What about 10 40ths? 1 over 4, right? 16 over 6. Now I'd probably go another step here. I've got 8x over 12, which reduces again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, any questions about that one? So that one actually had a lot of work with numbers. Yeah.
Oh my God, come on here.
Hold on. So anything on the top can cancel anything on the bottom. It doesn't have to be on the same side.
Which one's the other ones? One over here.
No. Anything on top on either side can cancel with anything on bottom on either side.
Even those variables?
So you'll notice this x squared cancels out x squared even though I canceled the x minus 2.
So much. You also, when you got into the red and black, like with
Okay.
times x plus 16.
10 40ths. Does that reduce? To what?
I feel like x squared minus 2 over x minus 2 is just the negative 2.
Not, you can totally make it cancel it. You can make it factor.
What about the 16 over 6? Is that
8. Because you're canceling out the 2 is what you're doing. What's the first step on the second one? Flip it. Anything factor? 3 factors out of the top. So what do I need to do to the bottom? Which makes it n minus 6.
Yeah, but
So I get 3 over negative n minus 9. Why is it negative n minus 9? The negative 1. And you could have put the negative 1 on the top. It'd be negative 3 over n plus 9, which is equivalent. So you could get some different answers, but they are all equivalent. Any questions about that one? I think that's it for the day. Alright, you've got your homework. Get started. You've got quite a bit of time left. Use your time wisely or I'll start teaching tomorrow's lesson. Yes. You're going to need lots of practice with factoring. You need lots of practice with simplifying fractions. I learned that 2 weeks ago when we learned this.
How are you looking at 2 variables?
Factor. So factor out whatever you factor out. Now, are you looking at number 7? You can cancel x's with x's and y's with y's. There's actually nothing to factor on that one. So you just start canceling. Yes. Good. If you cancel an x squared with an x to a fourth, the x to the fourth will still have an x squared left once you cancel.